News Radio 700 WLW.
Matthew Perry, former actor who was in Friends and some film work as well. The cause of death released in his passing included Special K on the street. It's known as ketamine. And also Andre Brower in the news, too, with his passing and a cause of death being lung cancer, which seemingly is becoming a lot more regular even for people who are not smokers. Kind enough to give us some time with some insight into all of these issues, Dr. Fahmi Farah. She's a cardiologist, invasive board-certified cardiologist based in Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome to 700 WLW with Sterling. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. It's great to be on your show.
I appreciate you making time. If we could start with the Matthew Perry thing, I mean, there's a guy who obviously in a lot of news as far as alcohol abuse and some other substance issues had seemingly been getting treatment. And this ketamine was apparently something he was getting, and many people are getting in some fashion for treatments. What do we know of that aside from the recreational use in veterinary medicine?
You know, ketamine is typically used in the OR in a hospital setting. We use it as an anesthetic. Typically, it's used with general anesthesia. It has effects of amnesia, pain medicine, sedation in general. But as you mentioned, there's use of antidepressant as well as it's being used as a street drug because of its hallucinogenic effects, and also, you know, the out-of-body experience that people sometimes have with it.
And when someone is dealing with this type of treatment scenario, I mean, anytime it's not prescribed by a doctor, overseen by a use of a doctor, not that a lot of people necessarily pay attention to that when it comes to recreational use, but there's a lot of danger with something that is used as an anesthetic and to help put people under, yes?
Absolutely. This is something that should be used under controlled setting. You know, this being used as a street drug, it could be extremely dangerous.
How common is it being used in relation to therapies for individuals, either trying to wean off of other addictions or other type of psychological problems?
Yes, it's actually not the first-line therapy at all for antidepressants. Usually for those who have severe depression and they've already failed multiple different typical antidepressant drugs, then their therapists, psychiatrists, they can use it, and that is used. But again, it has to be proven that they have been tried on other psychiatric medications that haven't really worked, and it has to be under a professional, licensed physician who is capable and trained to prescribe things like these.
And whether it's other types of mood-altering drugs or antidepressants, I mean, when some people are already getting cocktails of different prescribed drugs, trying to find whatever it is to sort of work with whatever disorder, dysfunction that they may be having. But mixing that with alcohol or something else obviously can be a deadly kind of circumstance, yeah?
It could be, yes. Alcohol and, in combination with some of these antidepressant drugs, especially ketamine, could be really detrimental and could produce catastrophic events. And one other thing I want to point out, the antidepressant effect of ketamine is actually not long-term. Studies have shown that the effect actually is very short term, and that's why it's usually not your first go-to drug for antidepressant.
Talking to Dr. Fahmi Farah, she's a cardiologist and invasive certified cardiologist based in Texas with Sterling on the big one, talking about Matthew Perry, former Friends actor who died. And the talk about the Special K or ketamine being in his system is a part of this. Something else that came up in you as a cardiologist, dealing with coronary issues, artery disease, other addictions and mixing of these type of things. At a guy at his age, early to mid-50s, how surprising is it that coronary artery disease is a part of what came up in that autopsy?
It's not surprising at all. Cardiovascular disease is seen more and more in the younger population. In fact, the recent studies and statistics show that in the last 5 years, the rate of heart attack and coronary artery disease have increased by 40% in the age group between 25 and 43 years old. Wow. So the fact that he was diagnosed with that, it's not a surprise at all for me.
And why, with so much more information and supposedly access to living better better, eating healthfully, and better lifestyle choices that we're aware of that can provide us longevity and quality of life. Why do you see such an increase in these type of problems, do you think?
You're right. Well, we know that, heart healthy diet and exercise, they make all the difference. In fact, 80% of heart disease is preventable with everything that you just mentioned. But are people actually utilizing those? Like, are they eating healthy? Are they exercising? Are they sleeping well? And then other addictions like, smoking, alcohol consumption, drugs, stress. All of those play a factor. Pollution is a factor too. So it's just like a multitude of factors that play a role in this statistic. And so the question is, how compliant are we in minimizing those risk factors?
When you talk about environmental exposures, is this one of those things that when you see people who live either near high traffic zones, interstate or freeway system, interchanges, et cetera, factories, downwind from certain things, we're seeing spikes in this type of disorder or a health issue on top of the lifestyle stuff that plays into that too then?
I believe it does. In fact, there was a study done recently. It was a large-scale study. It was done in China, and they looked at exposure. There's a direct correlation of exposure time to pollution along with heart disease. So it's pretty incredible. So they saw that the exposure time, the longer the exposure time was, the higher the rate of heart disease was in those folks in China. So I think based on that study, we can deduce then yes.
Talking to Dr. Fahmi Farah, cardiologist in Texas with Sterling on the big one. Matthew Perry, of course, being an actor, high-profile person. If it's me, maybe or my neighbor who passes away from something like this, you may not hear about it necessarily, or maybe in a hushed tone about, hey, how'd so-and-so die? But this is one of these opportunities where maybe it's a chance for us to learn from it and try to live better. In a benefit maybe in his passing to do some good for the overall population, I guess. Or I'm trying to be optimistic in such a sad story, I guess.
You're right. The silver lining here is that, this can raise awareness for so many people that we should really not be using these drugs, street drugs, on our own. It should be prescribed by a professional.
And I want to switch this if we can, Dr. Farah, because here's someone else, a renowned actor, Brooklyn Nine, Homicide: Life on the Street, film actor as well, a guy just 61 or 62 years old, Andre Braugher, great actor, even if he wasn't for that matter. He passed away unexpectedly, or at least to the public, just in the last week or so. And we find out at that relatively young age, depending, that he ends up with lung cancer.
80% of lung cancer is still caused by smoking, and it could be either first-hand smoking or even second-hand smoking. So that's still the number one reason for lung cancer.
And you say second-hand smoke, so people smoking around their kids and so forth. How much of an exposure are we talking about? Kids in cars smoked out, people at home not opening windows or going outside to smoke. I mean, I hear about it more, but it might be the fact that, I'm a man of a certain age, which was another show that Andre Braugher was in. These things are being talked about more regularly. It seems stunning to me that that's the case where we are in 2023 now.
It's true. You're right. So secondhand smoking exposure is very bad. It could have almost similar effects as firsthand smoking. So for children whose parents smoke, and if it's, closed windows inside the home or closed car, that could be very detrimental because the exposure is there, and that kid could have a lot of exposure, from that smoking, and they can get affected by this.
And what's your recommendation? Because it seems like even there are cases where, I had a neighbor who lived until his early 90s who tells me that, he smoked every day for decades. He used to drink whiskey every day. He told me that was the trick to living a long life. And he had no lung cancer. I think he had died of something else completely altogether, yet some people end up getting it early and having a problem. Is it genetic crapshoot, just bad luck? And what can we do? I guess it's lifestyle that goes into doing the best we can.
It's all of the above, actually. Genetics certainly plays a role. People who are genetically predisposed, they won't require as much exposure. But that being said, the key point is regardless of genetic exposure or predisposition or not, even somebody who does not have genetic predisposition, smoking is bad for everybody, and everybody can get cancer from smoking.
What have I not asked in relation to this? And I appreciate you making time on a Saturday night. Dr. Fahmi Farah from Fort Worth, Texas, cardiologist, board-certified invasive cardiologist. In relation to all these issues, I mean, thinking about health stuff, try to find a positive, light in the midst of talking about people who lost their lives.
Sure. When it comes to smoking cessation, I want to encourage everybody that it's not too late. Like, even if you have been smoking for 50 plus years, if you stop today, it'll still make a difference in your overall health, certainly for your cardiovascular health.
And exercise, how much running? I mean, it's one of those things I always think about. I haven't done a lot of running. I walk a lot with the dog. If I start running now, am I going to have a heart attack because I run too much? I mean, it seems like no matter what, I mean, we already know how it ends. I guess it's just trying to make it last as long as it can and as good as this life can be, too.
Absolutely, yes. I encourage everybody to exercise, but for those who have, risk factors like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, family history, and you have not exercised for a long time, then I would say get a checkup. For people all of a sudden start shoveling snow, that's a risk factor for a heart attack, and we do see an increased rate of heart attack during the winter month for those reasons, because these people are so deconditioned. They're not used to doing such heavy workload, and suddenly they go outside and shovel snow, and that's very high metabolic activity, and they end up having a heart attack. So to answer your question, if you have not been exercising and you have risk factors, you should get yourself checked before you start exercising.
Yeah, it is sort of that push the snow or ice out of the way heart attack season too. Great information and insight. I appreciate you making time on a Saturday night. Dr. Fahmi Farah from Fort Worth, Texas. How can people find out more? Is it the BentleyHeart.com website or what else?
Yes, also at drfahmifarah.com, and my social media handle is at Fahmi J. Farah, Instagram and Twitter.
Hope we can have you back on again, hopefully not talking about people who lost their lives, but maybe other ways to live healthier too. I appreciate you making time.
Absolutely. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, Dr. Fahmi Farah.